Thank you so much for your support on Patreon, Lee Clow. You too can get your own personalised shout out and early access to all content by visiting patreon.com/thewhoarix.
I don't want to go.
Regeneration is arguably the greatest concept in all of sci-fi television. A simple concept allowing the main character to continually change and refresh, allowing the show to constantly evolve and essentially go on for as long as it wants to. Without it, Doctor Who would have either ran out of steam long ago when the initial actor moved on or passed away, and the show would have had to have relied on a reboot, like James Bond has for instance, where the character has to change without much explanation. But Regeneration has allowed the character of the Doctor to be taken in so many unique different directions, with each actor bringing something unique and amazing to the role. It's enabled Doctor Who to have a consistent flowing mythology, following one era into the next, and it is the foundation of the show's longevity and what that is built upon. And today, following the 13th Doctor's regeneration in Power of the Doctor, I'm going to rank all of them. All 15 regenerations from worst to best. We're going to be taking into consideration 3 things when ranking them. 1. The cause of death for that Doctor. 2. The build-up to the regen with companions, etc. And 3. The regeneration itself. Now, this is the 3rd time we've made a regeneration ranking on this channel, so for any context on how my opinions have changed over time, feel free to check out the other 2 in the now trilogy of regeneration rankings. Nevertheless, let's get started.
God, no!
Propping up our list is the 7th Doctor's regeneration in the Doctor Who TV movie. For me, a good regeneration needs to be emotional, meaningful, and climactic, and sadly, the 7th Doctor's was none of them things. It's clear the 7th Doctor was brought into the TV movie to bridge the gap between the classic series and the movie, and to simply fill in the gap showing how the 8th Doctor came to be. For me, this makes this regeneration feel quite necessary and hollow. It's there because it has to be, and nothing more. The 7th Doctor walking out of his TARDIS and being shot by a gang highlights this. It was too sudden and lacking of emotion for me. It's like they just couldn't wait to get rid of him and they needed an excuse to do so. Now, they did try to add some suspense with the 7th Doctor pleading with the surgeons and them stupidly not listening to him, which of course caused his death, but this didn't really engage me. I also wasn't sold on the comparison and the parallels of the regen to Frankenstein's monster. I mean, it was well done, but I just didn't quite get it. The effects of the regen did look good though, that's one positive I will take. The electricity in the transition worked well, but that's about it for me. It is my least favourite.
Oh my God!
But for now, for this moment, I am the Doctor again.
At number 14, we have the War Doctor's regeneration in the 50th anniversary. Now again, similar to the last regen, this one was there to fill a gap and nothing more. The War Doctor's body had worn thin after the centuries of war and understandably was due a change once the war was over, and the question would have always been asked as to how he regenerated into the 9th Doctor. So Moffat added this to simply fill that gap, and because of this regeneration lacked any kind of build-up or climax. It was a nice surprise when it started, and seeing him regenerate in the TARDIS brought a little bit of excitement, and I appreciate the tiny snippet of Nine's face poking through at the end, but I ultimately fell a little bit flat after this regeneration, without seeing Nine properly. I understand the writers obviously couldn't help this. They tried to get Christopher Eccleston in, and he didn't want to be in the 50th, which is fair enough, but the power of CG could have at least allowed them to show his face move a little bit, or they could have got a voice note of him saying fantastic or something, and just CGI'd him in. You see that enough in TV shows now, and I think for that one exception, for that 5-10 second moment, it would have been worth it. And even if the quality wouldn't have been top notch, I think just seeing a form of the Ninth Doctor would have been enough for fans, and they would have looked past it being CGI, even if it didn't look 100%, because it was a form of Eccleston's Doctor, which we are probably never going to see again. So I felt a tad flat when it cut away so early in the Regeneration, and as well as that, it was just very ordinary. It didn't really have any excitement to it. It was as ordinary and as standard as a regen gets. The Doctor simply died of old age, nothing more and nothing less. If 9 did appear, it would have catapulted up my list, but unfortunately, it's got to be towards the bottom.
A tear? Sarah Jane?
Next up, we have the third Doctor's regeneration in Planet of the Spiders. From here, every regeneration has something that I really like, and it was a really tough list from here on in. For me, the third Doctor's regeneration felt a little flat. I liked the third Doctor facing his fears with the Great One and the death being due to radiation poisoning, but the regeneration itself and the effects are very, very dull and ordinary and lacking of any kind of emotion. The scenes between the third Doctor, Sarah and Brigadier were lovely, and especially the performance by Elizabeth Sladen. I also liked how this regeneration needed a little push, as to say that there was a chance that he may not have regenerated at all. But the effects of the regeneration were the most basic of basic transitions, even more basic than the 2 regenerations prior. Don't get me wrong, there are lovely moments in this regeneration, but in terms of other regenerations, it's not very memorable and not very remarkable.
You can't just change what I look like without consulting me!
You will have an opportunity to choose your appearance.
Oh.
Next we have a very unique regeneration, and it's the regeneration of my favourite classic Doctor, the Second Doctor. This was of course a forced regeneration, actioned by the Time Lords in their debut story, The War Games. Now there's nothing particularly wrong with this regeneration, and I do admire it for how unique and different it is, but it lacks any kind of climax or build-up. The scenes with the Second Doctor refusing the bodies put to him is rather funny and very in character, but there's no real emotion or effect to this regeneration. The Doctor just begins to morph awkwardly and spirals into darkness before disappearing. There's no real flow to this regeneration. It lacks that big momentous emotional end like other Doctors have had. But the idea is one I like, and it does deserve credit for that. Without Big Finish, this regeneration would undoubtedly be at the bottom of my list. The initial regen of the 6th Doctor was beyond necessary, and they pretty much forced him out the door, and shot what was the worst regeneration in Time of the Rani, with Sylvester McCoy in the worst, badly fitted wig imaginable. Sixie's final words would have been carrot juice, carrot juice, carrot juice, and his cause of death would have been him falling off of an exercise bike. Thank heavens for Big Finish. Instead, the 6th Doctor in fact died from the TARDIS being hit with radiation, which was only deadly to Time Lords, from the planet below, which was Lacertia.
Hold on, Mel! Hold on!
What is it? What's attacking us?
Focused beams of radiation. I don't know how I miss these readings.
As he passed out after Mel, Sixie had the opportunity to give a lovely speech which he hadn't had the chance to before. He reminisced on the lives he'd lived, almost as if he wasn't convinced that he'd even survive full stop. Sixie had almost given up on regenerating before, at the very end, he hears the 7th Doctor's voice saying it's far from being over.
It's far from being all over.
Who said that? Who is that? Who's there?
Which led into a regeneration which we did see in Time of the Rani. Now I can't thank Big Finish enough for giving the 6th Doctor a regen that he truly deserved, and I do admire how they also respected Time and the Rani, no matter what your thoughts are on that story, and they did let it continue on from then, even though the effects of the 7th Doctor's opener were absolutely terrible. But, of course, it does lead into Time of the Rani. It does lead into that opening scene, with the 7th Doctor lying down in that wig, and both the wig and the effects of the TARDIS landing are still unforgivable to this day. So, despite Big Finish and all the work they have done, they have undoubtedly boosted this regeneration up my ranking, but the rest still drags it down.
Change. I feel it. Yes. I will regenerate.
Yes, I will regenerate.
Physician, heal thyself.
At number 10, we have a mixture of some of the regens that I've discussed already. We've got a regen that's more so necessary to fill out a canonical gap, like the War Doctor's regen, but also one that I am super grateful that we've even gotten in the show, a bit like the 6th Doctor's regen from Big Finish. Now, I'll never forget my reaction to this surprise dropping on BBC iPlayer in the run-up to the 50th.
Did you guys see what I just saw? I don't know whether it was just because the flash was in... Oh my god. Matthew? Matthew? Yes. Stupidly, the BBC just gave it away right on the thumbnail.
Give what away? Don't tell me.
Matthew, I have to tell you because you'll know before I click play.
Oh my god, it's Paul McCann.
It's Paul McCann.
Oh my god, it's Paul McCann.
You guys won't be able to see it because of the flash. Sadly, it's in front of his face. But, oh my god.
Oh my god, put it on.
Right, here we go, guys.
No way, it can't be.
The old theme tune.
Stop talking about doctors.
I'm a doctor.
Please.
Yeah!
What are you expecting?
Oh my god. Oh my god. Jesus Christ. Oh my god. Oh my god.
And seeing the 8th Doctor physically on screen once again was a gift from the Doctor Who heavens. I particularly loved the simplicity of this Doctor's demise. Despite being faced with a girl who despises his own kind because of the war, he still refuses to leave her behind despite the ship crashing him to an inevitable death. The 8th Doctor goes down with the ship with a girl he barely even knows when he could have fled because of her bitter hatred towards him and the Time Lords. I also loved the uniqueness of this regen, with him being able to choose the type of incarnation he'll be turning into next, and seeing the Doctor's realisation that in order to stop the war, he'd have to change into something else was great and different, and I loved his final words and moments. It was a regen fitting of the story at the time and the Doctor himself. It was just a lovely little regeneration, and one I'm grateful we've got.
When he's dying, his body, it repairs itself, it changes.
Talking of regens that were unique, we'd seen nothing like the regeneration at the end of The Stolen Earth and into Journey's End, when the 10th Doctor was struck down by a Dalek, which finally hit its target for a change, and was forced to regenerate completely by surprise. This was possibly the most shocking of regens that we'd ever seen, as no one saw it coming. But it wasn't only there for the shock factor alone, and that's what I love about it. It took an already established plot point with the Doctor's severed hand and developed it into an even better one in the finale, which was well executed by RTD. It played on our emotions perfectly, teasing that perfect reunion between Ten and Rose before snatching it from right underneath us in the most impactful way. We've often had long drawn-out Doctor deaths and regenerations, but this one was quick, emphatic and impactful. You barely had time to even take it all in before the Doctor was on his back and about to regenerate in the TARDIS. The conclusion was also well executed and not written as a cop-out by RTD like he could have done. Yes, he wanted the story to move on quickly and not dwell on the regen for too long at the start of Journey's End, but he used the hand in a way which was great, allowing the 10th Doctor to remain the same face but also heal himself and carry on. This could have easily felt like a cheap and hollow regen and done simply to create a moment, but RTD made more of it, he took care of it, and he made it work within the story brilliantly. I guess it doesn't hold up as much credibility as other regens, as we never fully saw him go from one Doctor into another, but for what this was, it was a great regeneration.
I'm regenerated.
I'm going to take you to so many places. Barcelona, not the city Barcelona, the planet Barcelona. You'll love it. Fantastic place.
At number 8, we have another great regeneration. Hell, they're all great from here on in. And this is the first of the modern era, from the 9th Doctor to the 10th Doctor. Now, there was an aura of inevitability about this regeneration that I love. No matter what the Doctor did, or Rose, or anyone else for that matter, the Daleks were always going to catch them. They were always going to kill one of them. One of them was going to lose their lives through this. And like the 8th Doctor's regen, despite the much larger battle and threat around them at the time, the Doctor's death came down to something really simple and down to what he does best, and that's just saving one person's life, and in this case, his best friend being Rose. I love the 9th Doctor absorbing the time vortex to save her. It was different, something we'd not seen before, but doing it via a kiss has always felt a little bit off. Maybe it's because 10 is always the Doctor I put alongside Rose in that more romantic sense, but it always felt more out of character for me seeing the 9th Doctor do that. But regardless, his final scene with Rose in the TARDIS was great, as was his final line, which I love. It's a nice little contained regeneration that ticks all the right boxes. Nice emotion, a good final line, and really nice regeneration effect, one that's obviously become a modern trend since. It's all good, but it's just not one of the very best and one of my all-time favourites.
It's the end. But the moment has been prepared for.
Out of all the regenerations on this list, the 4th Doctor's regen is the one that's grown on me the most. I used to feel really let down by this regen, as I felt like the cause of death for the 4th Doctor wasn't good enough for a Doctor who'd been around for 7 years, and that it wasn't epic enough. But over time, I've come to get past that and really enjoy other parts of the regen even more. The Watcher is one of my favourite concepts in all of Doctor Who. I love the idea of the Doctor's future regeneration stalking him in a way, foreshadowing his pending demise. It's amazing how the companions recognise it and put the pieces together the same time we did when the Watcher appeared by the Doctor's side at the bottom of the TV tower. The combination of the 4th Doctor's iconic final lines, paired with the Watcher entering his body, the music too, the effect, it was all just great. I loved hearing all of the past companions shouting his name, something regenerations have continued with for decades afterwards. All of these elements made for a really nice cocktail, a beautiful regeneration, and the effects used with the Doctor turning white and transitioning into the 5th Doctor, almost like he froze for a moment. It was honestly gorgeous and spectacular for its time. It's a regen that has really, really grown on me, and I've just honestly grown to love it, and in future it honestly might just keep rising in my ranking.
I will always remember when the Doctor was me.
Into the top 6 we go, and at number 6 we have a regen that might surprise you, but it's the 11th Doctor's regeneration into the 12th. And let me just say, this is where it got super tough. Some of these regens I had as high as my second, I even had some as my fave, and they've dropped all the way back down to 4th, 5th and 6th once again. I think I even had this regeneration as my second at one point. I honestly found the top 6 ridiculously hard to call, but this is another great regeneration with another brilliantly unique cause of death. Now, staying on a planet called Christmas and growing old to protect a small town, again, is so Doctor, and is specifically very 11th Doctor, so this suited his character down to a T. I also loved the different dilemma here, and that this wasn't just the Doctor dealing with the end of a life, this was the end of a Doctor dealing with the end of his life, the end of his entire regeneration cycle. And despite this, I never felt like the Doctor was truly at the end of his life, though, in this story. Not just the 13th, or in any other particular danger of dying full stop. It felt like they could have really pushed the boat out more on this being the Doctor's final moment, his final stand. This was the end of his life. But I didn't quite get that on rewatch. It's something they could have maybe utilised a little bit better. The Dalek shooting at a clock tower was epic, but I never felt like the Doctor was in any particular danger of being gunned down completely, because the Daleks had been seen to be so useless and so terrible at hitting a target by this point. But nevertheless, the scenes with Clara before were utterly beautiful, and the moment the Time Lords gifted him the regenerations was epic and brought his entire era full circle. I've never been sure on the Doctor's regenerative energy destroying the entire Dalek fleet and every single creature on that planet, though. It felt a tiny bit convenient. But regardless, his final speech made up for this, and his final scene in the TARDIS with Clara was more than perfect. His speech perfectly embodied regeneration, and it not only felt like it was the 11th Doctor speaking, it also felt like Matt Smith was speaking through the character as well. It was a really touching moment. I also really welcomed the quote-unquote sneeze regeneration. It was different and really brought a different emphatic impact to the regeneration and the change, and really made the 12th Doctor burst onto our screen. So overall, other than a few small gripes in the build-up, the regeneration of this on the TARDIS itself is one of my all-time faves. It's a few of the other little things that make it drop down a few places, down to 6th.
Please don't change.
Blossom, yes, blossom.
At number 5, we have a regeneration that at one point was at the very top of my list, and it is the most recent regeneration from the 13th Doctor to the 14th Doctor. Now, as you can probably tell, I love a regeneration that is meaningful, impactful, and one that leaves a real impression on me, and isn't just there to make up the numbers. And this regeneration did all of them wonderful things. Now, I don't know why, but I never expected the 13th Doctor's death to be as brutal as it was, with her literally getting shot down by the Master. It really took me aback seeing this, as the Master is always threatening the Doctor without ever actually inflicting real pain on the Doctor, but the Master literally shot her down, and I loved that. The scene of Yaz carrying 13 back to the TARDIS is nothing short of epic, and the music and direction in this scene really made for an epic climax. I did find a few of the bits in between that and the regeneration a mixed bag. I still am not sure how I feel on 13 just kind of booting Yaz out of the TARDIS and her just walking off with no real additional moment of their final moment together, a final goodbye. I know the Doctor's never one for goodbyes, but even seeing Yaz leave the TARDIS, hug the Doctor, have one more look into each other's eyes, it just felt a little bit sudden that they had a nice moment on top of the TARDIS, eating ice cream, yes, but then after that, she just gone like that. It upset the flow. It didn't feel quite right, like there was a scene missing in there. But once 13 was on her own, this regeneration went up a notch and really was incredible. Her final moments with the TARDIS were so subtle and personal, and her final moments outside were so natural and beautiful. For years, I'd struggled to feel any emotion towards the 13th Doctor because her performance and character never felt natural or organic. But in this moment, I finally felt like I knew the 13th Doctor. Sometimes a regeneration doesn't need a long, meaningful speech. It just needs a nice, quiet moment, and that's what we got when 13 stepped out of her TARDIS, took in the brisk sea air in front of a stunning sunset, before regenerating amongst one of the most stunning landscapes I think we've ever seen. It was just a really nice, lovely moment with her Doctor, and one I'm so glad I finally got with her. That on top of her theme playing over the top made this one of, if not the most beautifully executed Regeneration, both visually. It being outside the TARDIS was wonderfully refreshing as well, and that's what I loved about it most. So once again, apart from a few things, this was nearly perfect.
Is this death?
Next up, we have possibly the most heroic regeneration of any Doctor, especially when it comes to protecting his companion, the Fifth Doctor's, in one of my favourite stories of all time, The Caves of Androzani. Both the Doctor and Peri were poisoned with Spectrox toxemia, and following Peri passing out, the Doctor heroically carried her back to the TARDIS, similarly to how Yaz carried 13 with an exploding planet behind him. Again, this looked so epic. And upon reaching the TARDIS, the Doctor committed one of the most selfless and heroic acts any Doctor could, as they only had one lot of bat's milk, so of course he gave it to Peri, saving her life and giving up his own. But it wasn't only the amazing sacrifice that I loved about this regeneration, it was also what followed. Because for the first time ever in the Doctor's life, he wasn't sure he was going to regenerate at all. For the first time, he was laid there, helpless. He was dying. He had no one to give that extra push like the Third Doctor did. He laid back and muttered the words,
I might regenerate. I don't know.
Feels different this time.
And seeing the Doctor this helplessly on the brink of death itself was such a great build-up and such a unique position for the Doctor to be in. And I loved seeing his companions one by one pleading for him not to die. It really put you in that moment alongside them. You were pleading for him not to die. You were pleading for him to push through this regeneration and change, especially when the Master come in and was pleading the complete opposite. You really had the good and the bad both, with the Doctor trapped in the middle, wondering, is he even going to change at all? Is the Doctor going to... Is he going to die right in front of us? Is the heartbeat going to completely flatline? It built and built and built until it exploded, and the Sixth Doctor sat up in what was an incredibly emphatic regeneration entrance, a bit like the 12th Doctor, and it worked really well with him, and it also worked really well with Six here. Now, his first words are a little bit strange and a little bit egotistical, but, you know, the regeneration building up to that was utterly incredible, and it's rare in Doctor Who I've ever felt like this when seeing a regeneration, when truly believing that the Doctor isn't just on the brink of changing, but on the brink of dying. But I really felt that here in the Caves of Androzani. The Doctor really felt truly vulnerable and on the very edge, and it really made for a great climax to an incredible story and regeneration. Undoubtedly one of the best of the classic era and one of the best ever.
Change, my dear. And it seems not a moment too soon.
Here we go. The long way round.
Initially like the Sixth Doctor's regeneration, the First Doctor's original regeneration was nothing to really shout about. I mean, this was of course due to a number of understandable circumstances. Back then, regeneration was an idea never explored before, and it was created mostly to keep the show going beyond William Hartnell, who, as we know, at the time was suffering with poor health, and it was due to this that in the 10th Planet, the First Doctor vanished for a long period of the final episode or so, only to pop up randomly at the very end, fall ill, and change into the Second Doctor. You can excuse this regen for not being too spectacular due to the circumstances, but it did fall behind its more extravagant and exploding successors. But that was until Stephen Moffat came along. Like Big Finish with the Sixth Doctor, Stephen Moffat wrote around past events with the wonderful David Bradley, and gave far more meaning and story to the First Doctor's regeneration, and it's one that works seamlessly. One result of this regeneration is unique to any other, and it's one that we've overlooked for years, and that it was his first. In the Doctor's mind, at least, he'd never experienced this before, and would obviously be anxious, he'd be uncertain, and be scared of this change, and the way Moffat wrote that in Twice Upon a Time was outstanding. Now, barring the slightly, shall we say, dated, sexist characterisation of the First Doctor, seeing him go on this journey, learning about the man he'd come to be, seeing his future, using the armistice, coming to terms that he is ready to regenerate and take on this crazy future life, it was just brilliant. No other words to say. As I said at the start, this all felt so natural and such a good fit. This is where the First Doctor went away to in the 10th Planet. It fits seamlessly into the lore. The ending, especially when he shook hands with 12 and entered the TARDIS to validate Gem of all scores. My word, it sent my stomach spinning. And then the transition back to Hartnell. It was all done with such care. By this point, my eyes were already full of tears, and the brief appearance of Troughton at the end tops it off. What an incredible regeneration, one spanning over 50 years. Stephen Moffat has brought us many great things in his time as showrunner, but this was one of the very best.
I don't want to go.
At number 2, we have maybe the most Marmite of regenerations, mostly down to the final line. And that is the one that broke my heart the most. The 10th Doctor regenerating into the 11th Doctor. I loved the arc leading into this regeneration, the whole arc of the 10th Doctor and his fear of dying. Fear we'd not seen in a Doctor before when faced with regeneration. We'd never seen a Doctor so attached to his body before. And as I've theorised in past videos about how long each Doctor lived, the 10th Doctor's life was in fact one of his shortest, so it makes perfect sense that, well, he didn't want to go. And we saw this take him into some of the darkest corners of his own being in the waters of Mars, before finally succumbing to the prophecy in the end of time, but not in the way we expected. People often judge this regeneration on its final words alone, but there is so much more to appreciate here. Not only is it the build to the regen amazing, but its execution was unbelievably clever. We assumed it was the Doctor's age-old enemy, the Master, once again his heartbeat signalling the end of the 10th Doctor. Yet when the Master left with Rassilon at the end and 10 remained alive, we all couldn't believe what we'd witnessed. The Doctor had defeated this prophecy. He somehow survived until the prophecy had been in fact staring him and us in the face the entire time. And it came down to that age-old sacrifice we'd seen the Doctor make before many, many times, simply saving a close friend's life. The performance here, the music dropping, the direction, everything in this moment was perfection. Never have I felt two complete juxtaposed emotions when watching a TV show before. From utter disbelief and joy to complete sorrow and sadness, my heart literally sank out of my chest at this moment. Despite all of these emotions, from the Doctor to the Time Lord victorious, 10 eventually still remained a hero. And despite all of his emotions, and ours too, he still stuck to his duty. Despite all of the intense emotion and internal dilemmas and fears that the 10th Doctor had experienced throughout all of his final stories, he eventually came back round to himself and who he truly is, and that is that he's the Doctor. And he saved Wilf's life in a truly touching scene. Wilf realised that it had to be done, but he still pleaded for the Doctor to not do it. But of course he did, and he sacrificed himself to save his good friend Wilf. I also loved how he went back to see all of his friends one more time, each scene giving us a different emotion. The goodbye with Jack was slightly comedic, others were slightly more touching, others were really, really heartbreaking. It just really wrapped up his era incredibly well. This regeneration was explosive, it was emotional, it was dramatic, more so than ever before, and it was perfect. Not only was it full of genius twists and turns, but it wrapped up 10's era and RTD's brilliantly. and regardless of his final lines, which I think fit the character at the time really well and was just enough when it comes to the Doctor being emotional, this for me simply has to go down as one of the best regenerations ever.
Can't I ever have peace? Can't I rest?
And finally, my favourite regeneration at number 1 is the 12th Doctor's regeneration in Twice Upon a Time. Now technically this regeneration actually started at the end of the Doctor Falls, with the 12th Doctor being brutally shot down by the Mondasian Cybermen after being chased from floor to floor on board their timeship. Now this, for me, was one of the toughest and most brutal yet heroic regenerations we've ever seen. Yeah, we've had the Doctor being poisoned via radiation or spectrotoxemia, he's died from old age, we've had forced regeneration, he's absorbed the likes of the Time Vortex, but rarely does the Doctor just get struck down by one of his greatest foes in such a hard-hitting way. The ending is just fantastic in that episode. Seeing the 12th Doctor blowing up Cybermen left, right and centre, referencing all of their previous battles, but slowly you can just tell in a matter of moments he is going to be surrounded, he is going to get shot, he can fight and battle on as hard as he can, but the Cybermen just keep coming before he is shot in the chest brutally. You see the pain writhing in the Doctor's eyes as he's brought to his knees, and seeing a Doctor struck down in such a brutal manner was and still is tough to watch. But not only that, the 12th Doctor didn't want the Cybermen to have the last laugh. In a kind of final act of heroism, he decides to blow them all up, including himself, and I guess, in the most ruthless of terms, take his own life in the process, destroying all of the Cybermen around him. This was so epic, it felt like it honestly was worthy of being the ultimate final battle between the Doctor and the Cybermen ever. Their final confrontation, their final battle to ever be seen, with neither coming out on top. Neither won, they all lost, everyone died. And seeing the Doctor laid there surrounded by bodies and rubble with a distraught Bill sitting over him, it was traumatic. This cause of death hits harder than any other for me. But this is only the beginning of what I love about this regeneration. I really loved the dilemma that the 12th Doctor went through following this, and that was his refusal to regenerate, and that he wasn't even sure if he wanted to at all. He wasn't sure if he even wants to live on. This was something we never explored before, and I found it so intriguing, but also so heartbreaking. Regeneration is a gift we often, and I'm sure the Doctor, takes for granted. That whenever he takes a risk, gets careless, pushes the boat that little bit too far, he always has that get out of regeneration. But you don't stop and think that after such a long and at times traumatic life, maybe the Doctor doesn't want to live on. Maybe he wants to call it quits, end the pain, end the suffering, stop losing people, and just end it all there. It's quite a savage and wicked thought, but I loved seeing the Doctor tackling this. It's kind of heartbreaking in a way, and this is the journey the Doctor went on in Twice Upon a Time. He, alongside the First Doctor, tackled their respective regenerations in front of them, and the lessons that they taught one another were lovely. Using a true miracle event like the Christmas armistice was incredible. You guys know how much I love it when Doctor Who mixes fact and fiction, and seeing the armistice shown on TV in this moment was beautiful. The quote when the Doctor says,
"The universe generally fails to be a fairy tale, but that's where we come in."
It's one of the greatest lines ever. This is Moffat at his best. But despite that, he still needed a really touching moment with Bill and Nardole where he contemplated one final time whether he could rest, and how everyone else in his long old life had fallen before him. Even the moment when his companions say, "You can rest if you want, that's completely up to you, but if you did die, the universe would go cold." It was a really eye-opening moment to the thought of the Doctor actually just giving up and not bothering to regenerate, and the consequences of that throughout the universe. What a wonderful moment with his companions, and what a wonderful speech at the end in the TARDIS. I do think if I had one criticism, it would be that the speech was a little bit too drawn out for the 12th Doctor and his character, but it topped off a truly beautiful regeneration which tackled many different dilemmas and emotions and stories and characterizations of the Doctor that I'd never seen before and that I really, really loved. It opened my eyes to a different side of regeneration, its meaning, my thoughts on it, and what it means to the Doctor. This had every emotion out there, and therefore, after years of tinkering and changing my regeneration ranking, the regeneration of the 12th Doctor in Twice Upon a Time is my favourite regeneration of all time. So guys, that is my regeneration ranking. Now I'm going to be honest, it's probably going to change again if you asked me this tomorrow, but that is what it is at this moment in time. I hope you guys have enjoyed it, and I would love you to rank all the regenerations below in the comment section below and tell me what you love and what you maybe don't love about each regeneration too. If you've enjoyed this ranking guys, do hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for much more Doctor Who content. Don't forget to hit the bell too so you're notified when we do drop an upload. Like I say, comment in the section below your thoughts and do support us over on our Patreon page. We've got so many amazing bonuses and rewards over there, as well as possibly getting a shout out in our next video if you do donate to us over there. But until next time guys, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.